2022, or you kind of wish that you had one?
I get a little bit of viewing in during the holidays. Like right now, I watched I got an Apple TV subscription just to watch Denzel Washington's Macbeth because they haven't
Okay.
find it. So it's kind of on holidays, but during the rest of the year, I'm so crazy busy that I don't often get the chance.
You see, I can't work without a lot of noise, but I
Mm,
can't be people noise.
I get that.
Like I can't work like in a cafe, but I can't work without television in the backdrop. It doesn't make sense.
Interesting. I end up working in cafes for the white noise. Like if there's things clinking and people chit-chatting and all that, and I've got like a really boring task to do, like paperwork stuff,
Yeah.
I'll sit there for an hour and a half and that's great. Whereas if I'm at home, it's like, oh, there's cats and there's dishwasher and there's things I could be doing. There's some laundry I should be doing or whatever, and it's just terrible.
See, I find people too distracting. And the irony is that when you're an artist and you're writing about people, the fact that you find them too distracting to write about them, that's the irony right there.
You're trying to focus on the ones on the page, but you're being distracted by the people there. It's
Like, why?
common with finding people interesting in general.
You'll be like, oh my God, 7 Splendas in his coffee. Wow. And then it's like, I have to start thinking about like, why seven? That's
Yeah.
just so much. Oh, kitty,
Oh yeah, this one is very disruptive.
a
But
cuddler.
yeah, she likes to be on my lap, and then sometimes she likes to get my attention by chewing electrical cords.
Uh,
And
there's
because
just
she's a
no other way.
ginger, she's very vocal about what she wants. So yeah, you might hear her. But
Those damn gingers.
right,
They just know.
they're very assertive.
Yes. Well, I'm curious then. We're heading towards obviously like first of all, I can't believe 2022 is ending.
Tell me about it.
I feel like, and I wonder your opinion. It felt I've been talking to a few friends who are artists. It felt like a filler year,
Yeah,
like a year of like because 2020 was so crazy, and then 2021 really just felt like a continuation of 2020.
mm.
2022 kind of felt like, I guess that whole craziness ended, but now like nothing crazy happened.
It's kind of also catch up, like all that stuff that you didn't do in the last 2 years. That you're sort of like, okay, is there space now to like crawl out of our shelters and do some of this stuff? Is how it felt for me too.
Sometimes I can't believe like our life paused for 2 years.
Well, I often think about World War II, for example, and like
Mm,
people dealing with very suspended forms of reality for 4 years, for example, food
yeah.
rationing and, bomb shelters and air raid sirens and make do and mend because you can't go to the store and buy new shoes. There are no shoes there to buy, you
Yeah.
know, that kind of thing. And I was like, well, it helps to have that perspective because I mean 2 years for us, it's not in our living memory, but it's within generational memory for sure.
Yeah. And then you add on, I think what's crazy is you add on the post healing, which is
Yes.
kind of that's what's really trippy. It's like, oh, it's over. It's
Yeah.
over. Okay. Okay, then why don't I feel like it's over? Like it's like somebody just declares the war is done and everybody like comes out of their shelters and they're like, well, now what?
Is it really safe to have a picnic in the park? We've been told that this is something we should definitely not be doing for the last 4 years. I'm not sure I want to be doing that. Well, it's fine now. Oh, really? That's
Yeah,
how.
or it's even like life is so surreal and so suspended that A, like what does grounded mean? And B, it's also like I kind of compare it like a really dark, twisted version of being on stage versus being off stage. Like
Okay.
you're in a surreal place for 4 years or 4 minutes, and then you come back to life, and it's like an absolute crash because
Yes.
it just doesn't measure up to whatever was happening over there.
Yeah, for sure. That's a real thing.
Yeah. It was too altered. Do you get that? Does that happen to you where you were like, I was on the stage and I was a star, and now I'm like, my kitten is eating my electrical wires.
Yes, absolutely.
How do you deal with that though?
It's a transition process. Like so I was in Italy in the summer and I was performing at this jazz festival and it was fantastic. Like it was a bigger event than I'd done before, especially over there. It was this gorgeous medieval town. There were stone streets and ancient buildings everywhere, and the stage was up there. I was looking out on this. It was really one of those moments where you kind of catch your breath and pinch yourself and say, "Is this happening?" And Italy was just fantastic. And then I came home, and it's like, oh yeah, and the dishwasher that needs to be done, and the trash, and the blah blah blah, and it's a major downer. Like
Yeah.
you end up feel I was a little bit off, I think, for a couple of weeks, and then I realized, you know what, everyone goes through this, and people who are on much bigger stages than I've ever been on have an even bigger drop from going here to being like that guy standing in the grocery store buying his coffee and his potatoes. You know what I mean? So we all have this thing. And it's just, once you know, like as long as you're aware of what's going on, you're like, oh, okay, all right, it's this again. It's just an adjustment period.
So who do you think is the real you?
Oh, they're both. It's just which one gets to be in front at which time.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that. I get that. I mean, it's weird. Like some people say, the stage person is the fantasy version. Some people say the stage person is the real version of them. I think it depends on your relationship with it or what you need to be your relationship with it because it can be a painful crash.
Oh yeah. I think of it as different hats for different outings, because I have a range of different roles. I mean, I am a musician and that's a really important part of what I do, but I also run a history podcast. I also teach at college. Now there's a bunch of other things. I'm also really into heavy lifting. And so each of those are different spaces where I show up and I do a different job or I have a different role. And so I find that it's like certain aspects of your personality come to the forefront depending on what's being called on at that time, and others kind of go to the background, and then you go somewhere else, and it kind of shuffles around. So that's how I think of it anyway.
It feels right that you would have a history podcast because like nobody just drops World War II as an example. Nobody just does that like in mid interview, like in World War II.
I did an episode on Churchill and the London Blitz. So, and
Hmm.
this was I think back in May. So it's freshly in my memory exactly what everyday life for normal people at home was like. Because most
Mhm.
people talk about the soldiers on the front and trench warfare and all that kind of stuff. But for mom and dad and the girls who were at home, it was a very wild experience in a totally different way. So, I guess that's why it's right there.
Mm, I have like a fascination with World War II just because of how big it was in
Hmm.
terms of history and like the world. Is there a period of history that you're like that just feels like music to you? Like it was just so
Oh, that's a tough, because I end up dipping into and inhabiting different times in history on a regular basis.
Mhm.
So, it's kind of like music. I have seasonal music preferences. There are certain things I like to listen to when it's cold outside that are not in the summer, and vice versa. And I think when it comes to history, there are certain periods that I like when I'm in a certain mood. I'm thinking about certain things, and others at different times. So, I couldn't pick just one.
You can't. Where are you now in terms of history? What season?
Right about in the late 15th century, so like 1480 basically, in Spain, because I've just finished a huge episode on the Spanish Inquisition. It's the fourth episode in a 5 episode series that I'm doing on Ferdinand and Isabella, the monarchs of Spain,
Mhm.
who sponsored Christopher Columbus and also initiated the Spanish Inquisition.
Because they were cool people.
They
They were
were.
very calm.
Actually, they're fascinating characters, and that's one of the reasons that I think I really got sucked into this and ended up doing more research and like more episodes on them than I've done on anyone else. Is that Isabella in particular is a badass. I mean,
Yeah.
she's very, very likable. Um, and all the kind of preconceptions you might have about a woman at, in her time and her place, she kind of blows them out of the water. She shows up in like full armor to review her troops on the battlefield, just for example.
Mm.
That's not something that women did in in the 1400s, not at all.
Yeah.
So she's really likable, but at the same time, she's responsible for initiating the Spanish Inquisition, which is truly awful. And so
Yeah.
you have this dilemma of, we really like this character. This woman is really fantastic, and yet she does this thing which is so awful. And how do you reconcile those two things? So I'm fascinated by that.
Yeah. And not to mention launching Columbus, and then he comes back with like people, and she's like, cool.
Yeah. Well, she's actually like, I don't want slaves. You take these people home, and you're not allowed to have these slaves. And Columbus is like, I'm sending you more slaves. She's like, stop.
Could you stop that, you crazy person?
Yeah.
I mean, it's so funny, like with Isabella, and you have Queen Victoria, and you just have people, women all across the world, Cleopatra, that just kind of, um, they are. In my head, I'm seeing a connection between them and artists because they kind of have to go above and beyond to make history.
Yes.
They can't just be demure flowers. They have to go to the excess. Like, I'm not just going to show up on the battlefield. I'm going to start the Inquisition.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm serious. It's because I do think that ambition is an individual thing. I think that there are ambitious people and they're not. And ambition is just like a genderless, um, it's just like a thing, an attribute.
Oh
But
yeah.
I think when you are a part of an oppressed community and you have that in you, that ambition, you have to be almost extreme a little bit.
Yep. Because you just have to surmount far steeper obstacles to get to the goals you're chasing.
It's
Yeah.
far steeper, and I also think that you're so easy to miss.
Yeah.
You're like you can't, and it's a huge complaint with a lot of female artists too, where it's just like I can't just do the music. I have to have 30 costume changes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the expectations are different around female performers than they are around male ones, and that's a whole other thing, right? I
Yeah.
mean, there are a whole different range of choices and challenges around that. And there's costume changes, and there's to what extent you need to sexualize yourself.
Mhm.
Like where are you going to go on that sliding scale, and sort of what people expect from you versus what you want to bring. These are all things that I think women in music have to think about all the time.
It is also like I like a prime example, like Lady Gaga during
Hmm.
the Super Bowl halftime show, like throwing herself off a building. Meanwhile, like Bruno Mars just played the drums.
Yeah.
And it was just like,
Yeah.
well, I guess cool. And everybody's like, whoa, he's playing the drums. And like Lady
Yeah.
Gaga's like, I'm gonna go off the building. And it's just one of those things where it's kind of like, and on one hand, it's really beautiful that you have these like you have these limitations that the only way to surpass them is by making yourself unlimited
Yes.
in an odd way, and like making yourself without boundaries to overcome these boundaries, because it was also like pretty amazing that she threw herself off the building.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
you know and there's Miley Cyrus with her wrecking ball, like these kind of stunts, like you have to go above and beyond, to get the same amount of attention. It's a fact.
Have you ever considered stunting?
I did a music video a few years ago where I actually trained for an entire fight sequence and did it. So there
Hmm.
were judo throws, and there was a move called a flying armbar, which I'm going to tell you is really hard to pull off.
Yeah.
And so I actually spent several months training to learn these moves so that I could play this character that we'd invented for the fight scene. And that video is out there. It's called Molasses, and you can find it on YouTube. We even went to the prop shop and got things that could smash, and like we went all out for that. So that was my dipping into stunting. Yeah.
Are you tempted though? Like, is there another stunt that sometimes you're like, huh, that would be nice?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I definitely like like things with adrenaline and adventure. So I had a film crew out just in well, two guys in October from the UK, and they came out. They're friends of mine. We were going to shoot another music video. They're actually the same guys who shot the fight scene video, by the way, but that was before, and they came out. So we were going to shoot this video, and then Craig, who's the director, was like, "Yeah, we're trying to get out and skydive while we're out here. Want to come?" And I was like, "Sure." So we all went skydiving on Sunday, just because, and
Yeah.
then rolled up and got into our filming the next day, and it was great. I really enjoyed it. So
That
yes, I like that stuff.
that was way too casual for me. You guys want to go skydive? I'd be like, no, I'm actually gonna get a nice coffee. I'll see you.
I was, I was like, I gotta drive them all the way out there to this jump zone in Abbotsford, which is like a 45-minute drive from where I live. I'm not gonna sit in the car and watch them skydive and like sit there and wait for them. Forget that.
I
So
need too much emotional preparation for the skydive because I love zip lining
yeah,
and I like river rafting and stuff, but they like it took me days to emotionally prepare that that was going to happen. And
fair.
then also, like, I think out of all the potential deaths, skydiving is just one of those, like, oh, like, oh, like, it's one of those, like, damn, the parachute just didn't go off. Oh, well.
I don't think I'd mind that one. I can think of much worse ways to go. But remember, I just finished like weeks of reading on the Spanish Inquisition, so my calibration of awful
Yeah,
death
sure.
is perhaps not representative of what normal people think of.
I just don't want, like, like those deaths where it's like, ah, so that's how they went. Eh, random.
Yeah,
You know, the
sure.
randomness of it, and also like the poor luck of it.
Yeah.
That bothers, where it's just like, ah, really? You know?
Yeah, you kind of want it to mean something. I'd rather go down in defense of a cause, ideally, in
Yeah.
action. That would be my preferred way, but no one gets to pick.
And it's also like, oh, it was in a Tuesday afternoon, like it all just feels like the most exciting, mundane thing. Like when like that death of that guy who was just like walking on the street and an air conditioner fell on him. It's
Yeah,
just like, oh, well, all right.
yes.
Bye.
The absurdity of it all. Yeah.
Yeah, the absurdity, the randomness, and again, like that weird blend of absolutely boring yet exciting death.
Mm. Exciting mostly for other people.
Exciting mostly for other people, but also like, yeah, yeah. I mean, you must go through that all the time, like learning about doing this historical podcast, and I'm assuming also as a songwriter, like that kind of trying to make, when you really think of it, trying to make things that are boring and casual sound like the most exciting things. Because history is exciting, but it's almost like, like when your friend comes to tell you about his or her vacation, and you're like, if I had been there, it would have sounded great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Fair. Well, I think in both cases you're dealing with acts of the imagination, you know?
Yeah.
Like you really have to inhabit uh that space. Whether it's a person that you're writing a song about, or it's a historical account of something that happened to somebody or some group of people, or you're listening to your friend. I mean, if your imagination is not in it and you haven't got that sort of internal movie going on, if you're just listening to narration, then it's not going to be very very engaging. And I think that the ability to imaginatively inhabit someone else's experience and shoes is really critical for good storytelling, and also for songwriting as well, I think.
Yeah, 100%. But is it that, what do you think is more important, the audience imagination or yours?
Well, I think as a songwriter, it's your job, first of all, to paint that picture and tell that story.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're doing it badly, such that the audience has to do a lot of work to make it good, then you're doing your job badly. Like it. So there's a song I wrote called Back Country Blues, and it
Mm-hmm.
shows up in my second album, Borderless Sky. And it begins with a line that says, "There's a summer night in Georgia. I'll wait for you there." And so right away, there's a signal given to the listener that, I mean, we're not talking about like a particular place or a time. imagine there's this summer night in Georgia. I'm going to wait for you there. And the whole song unfolds and it's talking about,
Hmm.
the smells and the sounds and the old boys down at the bar, and all that. And it's very much a deliberate effort to take that listener on a journey and to have them inhabit this space that was so vivid in my mind when I wrote it. And so I think that the responsibility is primarily on the songwriter to do a good job of evoking that.
Hmm.
And if you do that good job, and it's the lyrics are on point and the music makes sense for what you're trying to say, because then you two need to match, right?
Yeah.
Then as long as your listeners are paying attention, it should be very easy for them. It's almost like you're kind of pulling them along. They don't have to walk themselves. Like if their ears are open and you're doing your job, that song is just gonna scoop in there and take them away. And so ideally, I think that's how it should work.
I actually 100% agree with you. I think the difference is I don't know if you get as much of a chance or time as a storyteller when you're a songwriter. Like it's just like if you don't have them in 10 seconds, they're
Yeah,
gone.
yeah,
So that's where the real art is. Like I have to make sure I have you from the beginning because you will never give me another chance if I don't.
absolutely. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. It's true in life, it's true in songwriting. And so if you haven't got something that's bam, right there, straight away, then especially now, people's attention spans are even shorter than they were. You got 3 seconds. Flip, flip on the phone, flip, 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 scroll, scroll, scroll. So it really, I think it doesn't allow kind of a slow buildup. And I think that it definitely has influenced the way we write music. I mean, if you
Mm,
listen to Bach, for example, or you listen to Chopin, you're listening to long form music. And
yeah.
so it has kind of, an overview, it has an introduction, there are repeating themes, there are movements, and that long form music is designed for an audience that's going to listen and take it in a very different way than we do now. People listen to music on the go while they're driving their car and they're chopping vegetables in the kitchen and they're, exercising. And so you don't have the luxury in many cases of people just kind of sitting and giving you their full attention and being willing to be patient. And you see the same thing with speeches. I remember reading about the Civil War in America, and you'd have like guys, Lincoln and these guys getting up there and literally talking for 2 hours straight in front of a crowd.
Yeah.
Now, we don't, that's impossible now. We live in a world of sound bites and we live in a world of like, bam, grab them on the screen in the first 3 seconds. And so that automatically changes the way you package your content and what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. And it's just a feature of where we're at. And so, of course, songwriting and music writing is going to be affected in the same way. The
I
three
I
minute song. I mean, hello.
well, yeah, I mean, it's like nowadays a 2 minute song is long.
Yeah.
And then it has to be super catchy. I think things ebb and flow and there's good and bad. I do find it fascinating how much you can say in like 2 minutes
Hmm.
with like and with like a super catchy hook. Like that's fascinating. But it's also like, it is nice. And you get like a long form, slow kind of like let that meat sizzle track.
Yes. Yes.
And it's hard. I think it's hard. There, if there's one thing about being an artist, anytime, any place, anywhere, it's just always good and bad. You resolve one issue and one problem comes up. Like now everybody can be an artist. And it's also like, damn, everybody can be an artist.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's one of those like, and like, wow.
Yeah, I mean, and you have good things about that, and you got bad things about that. I mean,
Yeah.
I was hearing some numbers about how much is uploaded to Spotify like daily, how many tracks, and it's just mind-boggling. Like we're talking in the hundreds of thousands daily, and that's because the production of music has been democratized, and people can like the barrier to entry is so low that anybody can just kind of churn out stuff and get it out there.
Yeah.
So it's an emphasis on quantity, but that means it's really hard to be heard as well because there's so much noise. Like there's just so much stuff. that reviewers and people who make playlists and radio, they're drowning, right? And so
Yeah.
it presents its own challenges.
I mean, yeah, it presents its own challenges in terms of quality, access, promotion, and just like I think that there's a real clash, and I see it also as somebody who reviews movies between, old school, new school, not simply in sound, but in the mentality and approach of music. Kind of this feeling that because it's so accessible, it's so much easier. Is it actually good?
Yeah,
But
well, that's the question.
but sometimes I don't know if it's a matter of whether it's good at all or just good for now, because music has always had the timeless pieces where
Yeah,
you can hear them any era in
yeah,
history, and then it has those pieces where it was like, this is so 80s.
yes,
Woofed. That is
yeah,
100% 1988, and it
yeah.
stays there.
And it's just the spirit of the moment, which was perfectly captured. It was the
Yeah.
it thing. It was the trend of that 3 month period, and boom, there it is, and it's gone, right? Like,
Yeah.
for example, who talks about Squid Game right now? Nobody. But about a year ago, it was Squid Game, Squid Game, Squid Game was all you heard from people who were watching it, and it was all over the articles, and it was getting all this press on social media. It was like this phenomenon, and gone, right?
Yeah, that totally trips me out, like the surge and the quickness of its death.
Well, I'm sure
Yeah.
they'll make a sequel. Don't worry. I
Well,
mean,
yeah, yeah, but it's also like it's so bombarding when something's popular.
yeah,
It's like
drowns everything out.
a
Yes.
wave, and then it's just gone. And you're like, does anybody remember Squid Game?
Yeah, exactly. You want your
Like,
music to be like that, right? Like, honestly, for me, when I'm thinking about the music I want to make, I'm not trying to capture like the latest TikTok trend or that beat that everyone is after. I'm not looking at like the current trend and being like, okay, how can I integrate that into my thing so I can make the next hit? Because that's not why I do it. I mean, I would rather do something that I think has lasting value in it because the lyrics have content, and I'm really proud of where it takes that listener imaginatively, the fact that it's different. And I don't mind if it kind of cruises under the radar for quite a while, as long as the right people find it and it does its job, uh,
yeah,
but what music should do in my mind, then I'm okay with that. This idea of like, oh, I need to get like all these views and I need to get maximum, fame, and then like no one remembers that song anymore because it's over.
yeah. I
So
think it's hard because we're talking about turning your passion into a profession. And I
mm,
don't know one artist that isn't desperate in some way, because it's kind of there's the economic element of I really want to make money
yeah,
doing what I love.
yeah,
And I don't know if I don't mind making a trend. I don't mind. I think that there is something really cool and cute about the trends, like everybody getting in on it. But I don't know how possible it is, because when you really look at it, like you said, I mean, you put out a song and then 2 years later it's a hit. Like
yeah.
there's just something so random and chaotic about it. Like all you need is like one person to hear it and make a vid, and then that vid goes viral. And like and I see TikToks all about it, like, people just laughing at the fact that they'll have a business TikTok, but nothing about their business goes viral. It's the trend, or them on a boat when they actually sell cars. It doesn't make sense.
Look at what happened to Kate Bush's song "Running Up That Hill," right?
Yeah.
That song has been out there for how long?
Yeah.
40 years, something like
Yeah.
that, right? And then it gets put into a Netflix series called Stranger Things, and suddenly all the kids, all the 12-year-olds are watching it, and it's all over TikTok, and she's like, "What just happened?"
And they did some amazing remixes, those 12
Yes.
year olds.
Yes, they did.
They were, I was like, whoa, watch out. 12
Yeah.
year olds are coming for the
Mhm.
billboards. I mean, I think that's what's crazy too. Like the schism, old school, new school, it's much more layered. And I think there's just something like if you're 19 and a 12-year old is outdoing you, there's even that can be bothersome. It's just like, what?
Yeah.
How? Like there was just a news article about this like 14-year-old kid that landed a plane, but because he plays video games every day.
Yeah, it's
And it was
amazing.
like an emergency landing. I think the pilot had a heart attack and he did it. And it's the fact that knowledge, even the knowledge is so accessible. It's just, it's admirable and it's also terrifying.
Agreed. 100%.
Just like, what, well, get it a little existential. But this is it. Like my interviews are pretty conversational. We're past 30 minutes.
Are we?
Yeah,
We
we
haven't
were.
even talked about the album. Do you
I
have thoughts
know,
on
I
the album?
know. I mean, we could go let's go further into it. I mean, what do you feel like with all that we've said, like when you think of your album, like with all that we've said about history, about the time frame that we're in currently in music, how do
Mhm.
you feel like your album is either a result of that or even like a reaction to it?
Yeah,
Result or reaction?
I think it's more of a reaction, and I think you can see that right on the cover. Like the cover art for this album looks like, I think it looks like a painting by Rembrandt or Titian, right? And
Mhm.
that was a very deliberate choice. I found this photographer who does photographs in the style of paintings, and I knew immediately, okay, I need to work with this guy. I have this idea, and I know that he's going to be the one to carry it off. And he blew me away with the cover art, um, which is not sort of conventional jazz cover art. I mean, it's fine, but it's no one was expecting that cover. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's like a Rembrandt. So already there's a historical callback, and the songs themselves are kind of a mix. This album is a bit of a departure from some of my previous work in that there are more synthetic elements in it, like a
Yeah.
synth kind of sounds, which I've mostly avoided up to this point. But we did play with that a little bit. However, the lyrics are, especially the title track, "The Feel of Your Love." I mean, it could be a sonnet. I mean, I'd have to rearrange the lines, but
Yeah.
in terms of the images, in terms of the language that's being used, it's very deliberate, and it's very clear.
Mhm.
Um, and it's writing in a style that is steeped in my own kind of years of being an English lit nerd. So um, one of the things I love about jazz is that it often is really acoustic, and it's warm, and it's human voices and human instruments in a room, and I like that. That's not what most music today sounds like. This album is kind of in between. It's
Yeah.
got those jazz styles, but it's got some more contemporary synthetic things going on. But also the songwriting and the lyrics themselves are very much kind of in that older tradition, which is where I like to be.
So in a way, like what it's kind of what we were talking about, where you said it is reactive, but it sounds like just the mere inclusion of synths is trending.
Yeah.
So it's this inevitable, like you've been trended. You've
Yeah.
been influenced by the trends, whether
Yes.
you think it well, it seems like you think it too. Like you hear these synths all the time, but you're trying to mesh it with who you are, which is the English nerd, the history buff,
Yeah,
the
exactly.
sonnet lover.
Yes. Yes. Self-described Shakespeare nerd, like since as long as I can remember. So it's a challenge. And I think that it's okay that each album is kind of its own thing, right? Like
Mhm.
this one was a particular set of choices and an experiment, and it was where I was at the time and who I was working with, which is always a big part of what comes out. So I was working with producer Bryant Didier in Toronto, and I'm on the other side of the country. I'm in Vancouver, he's in Toronto. So it's like a 4.5 hour flight across Canada to get there. Um, but he brought some of his own sensibilities to that in terms of the synth and the sound processing, and it's this kind of creative collaborative process that you end up doing. And we'll see. I mean, the next album will be different again,
Yeah.
but it's going to have a lot of the same priorities that I have. They'll just be mixed around differently, and it'll
At
depend on.
least lyrically.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. I feel like people don't grow as, I mean, you grow as a lyricist, but it's one of those like, yeah, we grow, but we're all the same at the same time
Yeah.
versus soundscapes that, yeah, you do play with them. And do you feel like when you think of this new record, like it's the closest to you that you've ever been as an artist?
There were definitely things in the like there were a couple of tracks that got close to where I wanted to go because
Hmm.
one of my things about jazz is like I want to write a song that becomes a jazz standard. You know what I mean? Like
Oof.
one of those
Yeah.
songs that lasts decades and decades after it was written, and people come back and they play it and they cover it and they, because there's enough life in it that
Yeah.
people want to continually revivify it with their own mixes and their own contributions. And so that's kind of always in my mind. And
Mhm.
I think that The Feel of Your Love is a song that maybe has that potential. And we did it one way on the album. I'm going to be doing it differently live very soon as I start rolling out performances and tour dates and whatever. So that song is going to go through many lives as we perform it in different places with different people who've got different influences. But it haunted me for months after I wrote it, just the words and the mood. And so ultimately, that's what I'm chasing. Whether I succeeded or not, only time will tell. Like it's not something I can tell you now, but I can tell you what I'm shooting for.
Yeah. And I don't think uh, every artist, I think, aims to be timeless. I think the difference now with like trends is that we kind of, and maybe it's a foolish thought, we hope that if we trend enough, we'll be allowed to be timeless.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
people will listen to us endlessly. But at the same time, the timeless records, they were just something, they were art.
That's right.
They were beyond, they nobody thought of a trend. Like there was just art.
Yeah, exactly. And it's
Mm.
that purity of that expression that is lightning in a bottle. And I think
Hmm.
you ultimately, to get there, you have to focus inward more than focusing outward.
Yeah.
And it's about embodying the truth of some part of the human experience. And if you can do it profoundly and purely, then people are going to recognize that and say, oh, that's how I feel. That's what that period of my life sounds like.
Yeah.
It's right here, and I can't even find the words for it myself, but every time I play this song, it says exactly how I feel. And like, there you go.
That's exactly it. Profoundly, purely, and even a little playfully.
Yes, that
Like just
helps.
have, even if you're writing your saddest song, you're having fun with that sadness.
Yeah, a
It
sense of
is
humor
really,
is very important
yeah,
for
yeah,
for survival in life and for success in songwriting.
yes, and to survive how history as
Absolutely.
a as a well that was the interview. But thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed it. We definitely, I love history, so anytime I get to talk about World War II, I feel it's a good day.
It was very, very enjoyable. It was a wonderful wild ramble, and I enjoyed it very much. Thank you, Diandra.
Thank you, and have a great day.
Yeah, well, send me a link whenever you're done with the interview. I
I
want to
would
send it.
I
Eva
always send
Schubert.
it to the publicist, who
Yeah,
I
yeah,
imagine forwards it to you as well.
they will. Yes.
Yeah. All right, cool.
Okay. Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Bye.
All right, bye.